Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. It all began so innocently, I swear. One night, he came home with this glossy little brochure, all earth tones and stock photos of smiling men sitting around a campfire. Men's Renewal Retreat. It said, unplug, reflect, reconnect. I didn't even question it. I thought it was sweet. My husband, the ever-busy accountant, wanted to reconnect with his inner self. I applauded it. Packed his favorite hoodie, made trail mix, kissed him goodbye like a loving wife should. But something about how he clutched that brochure, how he wouldn't let me read the back page, it stuck with me. I ignored my gut. Biggest mistake of my life. When he came back, something was different. His hugs were warmer, but his eyes were distant. He started journaling, which he had never done before. He began quoting Rumi. He'd gaze at the sky like it held secrets only he could understand. At first, I thought, wow, maybe that retreat really worked. Maybe this is what self-growth looks like. But then he started using weird phrases like emotional unzipping and soul partnering. At dinner one night, he said monogamy was a colonial structure. I nearly choked on my mashed potatoes. I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. Not even close. A few weeks after his return, he said the guys from the retreat were doing weekly integration circles at someone's house downtown. It's just the brothers processing their healing, he told me. Brothers? My husband had never referred to anyone as a brother in his life. I asked if spouses could come. He looked almost alarmed. It's a sacred masculine space, he said, like he was reading from a script. That night, I followed him. I know how that sounds, but I had to. My intuition was screaming. He drove to this fancy townhouse with dim lights and incense, smoke floating through the open window. And I swear, I saw him kiss someone at the door. On the lips. I confronted him the next morning, casually, like, hey babe, what's the retreat group up to? And he, without blinking, said, oh, we're working on deeper relational practices. That's when I asked, so who's Marcus? His eyes widened for a second, then he smiled. Marcus is my healing partner, he said. Like that would explain everything. I asked what that meant. He said they were exploring connection beyond the binary. I asked again. He said, we're practicing expansive love. I asked again. He finally said, okay, we're dating, but it's within the framework. I had never wanted to throw a healing crystal at someone so badly in my life. Turns out, this retreat wasn't just a men's group. It was a whole network of people in something they called intentional polyamory. Like, capital I intentional. Weekly meetups. Shared Google calendars. Consent forms. I was shocked. I had never consented to anything. He said I was part of the monogamy experience module. I was not a software plugin. I was his wife. He swore he loved me, that nothing had changed, except that now he was expanding love's capacity. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat there in our candlelit living room, realizing I was the last to know I was in a relationship experiment. And I hadn't even signed up. A few days after his confession, I found a stack of glossy brochures by the door, hidden under the pile of old magazines. They were for a men's retreat weekend again. I thought it was strange that these were all so new, but as I read through them, my heart sank. The invitation was clear. It wasn't just for him. It was for them. All of them. The group was growing. He had met more people. They were now organizing entire weekends at rented cabins, workshops on unlocking desire, and yoga retreats focused on experiencing your partners. That's when I realized I wasn't invited. I wasn't even a thought in their grand plan. The men's group had evolved into something else, something bigger, and I wasn't a part of it. At first, I thought maybe I could be open-minded about this. I even tried to learn about polyamory, read some articles, but every time he used phrases like heart expansion or energetic syncing, I wanted to throw a tantrum. It wasn't that I didn't trust him. It was that I didn't trust this whole thing they were building. Slowly, his weekend retreats turned into getaways that lasted for days. He'd come back exhausted, as if he'd run a marathon, and then speak about his soul partners like they were his family. I kept telling myself, it's fine. I'm just adjusting. I'll be fine. But deep down, I wasn't fine. I was spiraling. Every time he left, the anxiety would claw at me. Where was he? Who was he with? And most of all, why wasn't I enough? One night, he invited me to dinner at a friend's house. I was happy. Finally, Maybe we were going to talk. Maybe we'd reconnect. But when I got there, I wasn't prepared for the scene I walked into. The dinner table was full of women. All of them smiling at me with that odd familiarity, like they knew me. One even waved and said, "Oh, you must be his wife, the monogamy partner. We've heard so much about you." I was frozen. His friends weren't just his friends. They were his partners. I felt out of place. Invisible. Every time I spoke, it was like I was a guest in their house, but not quite welcome. And my husband? He was sitting there, so proud, smiling between them, as if he were the king of his little love kingdom. After that dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I started digging. That's when I found it. His phone buzzed late one night, and the text preview caught my eye. It was from someone named Lily. It said, "Hey babe, can't wait to see you tomorrow at the group. I'll be bringing fresh lavender oil for our session." I froze. Who was this? I had never heard of a Lily. I looked at the time. It was 2:30 a.m. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Who was he seeing at 2:30 in the morning? He wasn't home yet, and there was no group. Just this text. I waited up all night for him, but when he finally came home, I knew something had shifted. His eyes were tired, distant, and when I asked who Lily was, he only said, "It's just one of the girls from the group. You wouldn't understand." The trip came without warning. A whole weekend away at a cabin. But when I tried to prepare, packing a bag for him, he told me, without hesitation, that this time, I couldn't come. "It's just for us, babe. For the brothers to grow," he explained, almost too calmly. I stared at him in shock. This wasn't some corporate retreat. This was a life-altering group experience that I had been systematically excluded from. His voice was soft, but his words were like a dagger. "You need to understand. This is my journey. I love you, but I need to be with my partners right now." My hands shook. "Partners? Partners?" I wanted to scream, to demand he explain, but all I could do was nod, pretending to be fine. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. A few weeks passed, and then he had to go on a work trip for a few days. He was vague about the details, saying he'd be working late nights and couldn't talk much. But something in his tone didn't match his words. My suspicions grew. I wasn't buying the work trip excuse anymore. The day he left, I drove to his office, only to find it locked. No one was there. No meeting scheduled. I felt a strange mixture of rage and heartbreak as I stood in the empty parking lot. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. He had been lying. I called the hotel where he supposedly booked a room. No reservation under his name. I felt like a fool, a clueless fool in a marriage that was disintegrating right in front of me. When he returned from his work trip, he looked more relaxed than I had ever seen him. Too relaxed. The night he came home, I was in the living room, scrolling through his social media accounts, something I had never done before. I was desperate for any clue, anything that would make sense of his behavior. That's when I saw it. A picture of him, laughing, surrounded by 4 women. The caption read, "Our tribe, united by love and shared experiences." There it was. His group. The polyamorous life he'd been building behind my back. My heart shattered as I stared at the smiling faces, at my husband looking more at ease than I had ever seen him with me. I confronted him, and he tried to brush it off. "It's just a group photo, nothing to worry about." But I knew this was more than just a retreat. This was his new life. That night, after the confrontation, he sat me down and began what I can only describe as a well-rehearsed speech. "Babe, this is all about unconditional love," he said, his voice soft but insistent. "What we have, the way I love you, it's beautiful. But it doesn't mean I have to stop loving others. You have to understand this. It's not about you. It's about me growing, about all of us growing together." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't process his words. My brain was a whirl of confusion, betrayal, and anger. "You love me," I repeated, my voice shaking. "But you're out there loving everyone else too?" He nodded. "It's the path I'm on, and I need you to understand that this isn't about replacing you. It's about expanding." Expanding, as if it were some kind of noble cause. But it wasn't. It was betrayal dressed in pretty words. It was him choosing everyone but me. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know the truth. I needed to see what he was doing, who he was seeing. I started sneaking around. His phone, his computer, his calendar, everywhere. But the one place I didn't think to check was his bag. One night, while he was taking a shower, I opened his travel bag. And there it was, an envelope with a familiar name written on it. Lily. My heart skipped a beat. I pulled it out, my hands shaking, and opened it. Inside, there was a handwritten note. Can't wait to see you this weekend. I've already booked our room. This time, I'll make sure we have time for just us. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. But instead, I folded the note back and slipped it into my pocket. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. He was living a double life, and he hadn't even tried to hide it anymore. It wasn't until I found out about the trip he had planned for the following weekend that I truly understood the depths of his betrayal. He had been planning a getaway, a weekend retreat, but not for me. He was going with his group to some secluded cabin by the lake. It's a special weekend for us, he explained casually, as if we were still living in the same reality. He told me he'd be back on Sunday night, but I knew he wouldn't. I knew that trip would end up being another one of his soul expansion weekends, one where I was once again left behind. He hugged me before he left, and for a moment, I saw it, a flicker of guilt in his eyes. But it was gone so fast. A tiny moment of regret that quickly turned into a smooth, practiced smile. I love you, he said, and I couldn't help but wonder. Was that the love he had for me, or for the life I was no longer a part of? The weekend arrived, and I stayed home, alone in our empty house. He left early Friday morning with nothing but a quick kiss and a see you soon, babe. I spent the next 3 days in a daze, doing chores, pretending everything was normal. But inside, I was a wreck. I kept imagining what he was doing, where he was, who he was with. My mind spiraled, my jealousy and fear consuming me. It wasn't just about the physical distance. It was the emotional betrayal. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't just losing him. I was losing myself. I wasn't even me anymore. I was the wife of a man who didn't want to be tied to just one person. He had a new life, and it didn't include me. That weekend, I cried in secret. I cried for the marriage I thought I had, the one that no longer existed. When he returned, everything seemed off. He was distant, quieter than usual, and even his kisses felt hollow. I could sense the change in him, but he pretended everything was fine. The first thing he did when he walked through the door was drop his bag and ask if I'd eaten yet. I stared at him, the questions pressing on my lips. But instead of confronting him, I waited. I didn't need to ask. I didn't need to know exactly what happened that weekend. I felt it. The distance was palpable, thick with unspoken truths. I couldn't understand how he thought everything could go back to normal. His eyes avoided mine, his answers were short, and he spent hours glued to his phone. I knew it was happening again. He was still involved with his other partners, and he was not willing to let go. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. It had been months of this mess, and I was finally at my breaking point. We need to talk, I said one evening, my voice shaking. I saw him stiffen, his usual calm composure faltering for the first time. He knew what was coming. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending like I'm okay with you going off to these retreats, with you loving everyone but me. I need to know what's going on. I need to know if I'm even still your priority. He looked at me, his eyes cold and distant. You knew what this was when we started, babe. You knew that this was my journey. You were supposed to accept it. I felt the sting of his words, and for the first time, I realized he had no intention of changing. His journey was more important than us, than me. I couldn't leave it there. Not after everything. I looked him in the eyes and said, You don't get it, do you? You think I'm just supposed to watch you love others, watch you build this life without me? You don't even see how much it's breaking me. His eyes wavered for a moment. He opened his mouth to speak, but stopped. The silence between us was thick, suffocating. Finally, he said, I never meant to hurt you. But this is who I am now. I can't change that for you, no matter how much I love you. His words cut through me like a knife. It wasn't about love anymore. It was about his need to explore, to be free. And I realized, in that moment, that I had become a footnote in his life story. The next few days were a blur of emotions. I felt torn between love and resentment, between holding on and letting go. I thought back to the beginning of our relationship, to the promises he made, to the way he looked at me with that spark in his eyes. But now, everything was different. I wasn't his one. I wasn't his everything. I was just another piece in a puzzle he was still assembling. Finally, I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for someone who didn't even understand the depth of my pain. So I left. I packed my things while he was out at another one of his sessions. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. He knew what I was doing. This wasn't just about leaving him. It was about finding myself again. I had been lost for so long, living in the shadow of someone else's dreams, that I forgot who I was. And now, I was going to remember. I left the house that night, taking only what I could fit into my car. The silence in the house was overwhelming as I closed the door behind me. I didn't look back. As I drove away, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in months, I felt like I was making a choice for myself, one that didn't involve him. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I was going. But I knew one thing. I had to rebuild my life. I drove aimlessly, the road stretching out before me, until I found a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It was the first step toward freedom. A place where I could breathe again, without the weight of his lies and his other lovers hanging over me. A few days later, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew it was him. My stomach churned as I stared at the screen. Should I pick up? Should I listen to his apologies, his pleas? My finger hovered over the screen, but in the end, I let it ring out. I wasn't ready to hear what he had to say. Not yet. I needed time. Time to heal. Time to figure out what I wanted without the noise of his manipulations. The truth was, I didn't know if I could ever go back to him. I didn't know if I wanted to. His lifestyle, his lies, the way he treated me, it was all too much. I had to let go. But the temptation to take his call was there, and I knew the road to fully letting go wouldn't be easy. The doorbell rang a week later. I hadn't expected anyone, and when I opened the door, there he was, standing in front of me, looking lost. "Can we talk?" he asked softly. I felt my heart twist in my chest. There he was, the man I thought I knew, the man I once loved. But in that moment, I didn't recognize him anymore. "Why?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and confusion. "Why now? After everything?" He looked down, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I'm sorry. I thought this was what I needed. I thought I was being true to myself. But now I realize. I hurt you. I hurt us." The sincerity in his eyes made my chest ache. But the truth was, it didn't matter. He could say all the right things, but the damage was done. And I couldn't go back to a life where I wasn't enough. "I've already moved on," I said quietly, stepping back to close the door. I had to do this for me. In the weeks that followed, I focused on myself. I went to therapy, something I had never considered before. I started to rebuild my confidence, my sense of self. I made new friends, found new hobbies, and even started a yoga class to find peace within myself. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to give in, to call him and beg for the old version of our relationship. But I stayed strong. I reminded myself that I deserved better. I deserved someone who saw me as their everything, not just a part of a complicated equation. I worked through my anger, my hurt, and slowly, I started to heal. Each day was a step forward. And with each step, I realized that the love I had been looking for had to come from within me first. Months passed. I learned to enjoy the quiet, the stillness of living alone. I stopped looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to come back and disrupt my peace. And then, one morning, I woke up to find that I had moved past the pain. I had forgiven myself for allowing the relationship to go on for as long as it did. I had forgiven him, too, not because he deserved it, but because I needed to free myself from the chains of resentment. As I stood in front of the mirror that day, I realized how much stronger I had become. I was no longer the woman who let someone dictate her worth. I was me, and I was enough. The world was full of new possibilities, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I was ready for whatever came next, on my own terms. It was a regular afternoon when I bumped into him again. I didn't expect to see him at the coffee shop, and I certainly didn't expect the wave of emotions that hit me when I saw his face. He stood there, nervously shifting from foot to foot, clearly unsure of how to approach me. "Hey," he said, his voice tentative. "I didn't think you'd still be around here." I forced a smile, trying to keep my composure. "I live here now," I replied, the weight of the words not lost on me. He stood silent for a moment, then finally spoke. "I miss you. I know I messed up, but I want to try again. I can be different this time." His words felt hollow, like he was reading from a script. I felt a sharp pang in my chest. I wanted to believe him, but I knew better now. I wasn't the same woman I used to be. As I walked away from him that day, something inside me shifted. I had been giving him power over my emotions, over my life, for far too long. He had controlled my happiness, my decisions, and my heart. But not anymore. I wasn't looking for closure from him. I had already given myself that. I had let go of the past, and there was no going back. The clarity that came with that realization was freeing. I knew I could never go back to the life I had before, and that was okay. I was finally free to be the woman I had always been meant to be, strong, independent, and unafraid to chart my own path. Weeks passed, and I kept moving forward. I took more trips, visited friends I hadn't seen in years, and started focusing on my career. I began to thrive in ways I hadn't even imagined. The weight that once held me down was gone. I started to find joy in the little things: morning walks, late-night talks with friends, spontaneous road trips to places I'd never been. It was like I was rediscovering life, rediscovering myself. And with each passing day, I felt stronger, more confident, more alive. The woman who had been heartbroken and lost was slowly transforming into someone unrecognizable, a woman who was finally living on her own terms. Then it happened. I met someone new. It wasn't something I was looking for, it just happened. We met at a mutual friend's dinner party, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He was kind, funny, and real, the opposite of everything I had once known. He respected my boundaries, he listened, and most importantly, he never tried to change me. It wasn't love at first sight, but it was something much more meaningful: respect. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could trust again. We took things slow, but each day spent together was a reminder that not all relationships were built on lies and manipulation. Some could be built on honesty and mutual respect. It's been a year now since that day I walked out of our old house. A year since I made the decision to let go of the past and step into a future I had once feared. I don't regret the choice I made to leave him. I don't regret the pain, because that pain led me to this moment, to a life that's mine, to a love that's real, and to a version of myself that I never thought I'd find again. As for him, I haven't heard from him in months. I know he's still on his journey, but it's no longer my problem. I've moved on. I've let go of the anger, the resentment, and the fear. I am who I am because of what I went through, and I will never again let anyone dictate my worth. I'm stronger than I've ever been, and this time, I know it's for good. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you like the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.